into courtship, and this is my demonstrated speech titled Claim Your Birthright and Learn to Knit. Okay. Tracy Ullman once said this about knitting. It's like a woman's birthright to knit. It's primal, it's timeless, you don't need electricity to knit. You can do it with a candle, girls. And isn't that right? Today we will learn a craft that will take you back to your primal roots. You'll acquire skills that would stay with you for a lifetime. We will identify knitting needles and yarns that we will need to get started with knitting, and how to successfully create your very first slip knot, cast on, and knit row. We'll start off by learning a little bit about needles. The basic materials needed for knitting are knitting needles and yarn. These seem to be the hardest part when in choosing a new project. The information that I gathered were from Knit Snob, Knitting 101 blog posts, and easy how-to videos on YouTube, as well as Line Brand Yarns and Martha Stewart Living websites. There are 3 types of knitting needles. Most patterns call for straight, double-pointed, or circular needles, and I have them here for you. They have straight needles, which are used for making flat items such as scarves. We have circular needles that you can knit circular items or spherical items like making a cowl or a hat. And we have double-pointed needles, which are used for making small cylindrical shapes like socks and gloves. Okay. And also another thing that you need to keep in mind is the needle size. It should be labeled on your needles. And this just tells you the size of it in US and metric sizes. And the larger the number, the larger the width of the needle. Also, needles come in different materials that you can buy them in, like wood or metal, and the ones I have are metal today. So that's all you need to know about your knitting needles. Most patterns should indicate the size of the needles required, which this also helps you determine the gauging and the tension that you'll need to have. And this also plays a part in choosing your yarn, which is the next step for us here. Choosing different sizes and weights can have a major impact on your finished product, affecting again your gauge and your tension when knitting. And this information is once again gathered from Knit Snob or Craft Snob, Knitting Posts, Martha Stewart, and Lion Brand Yarns. So yarns come in so many different types of colors and materials out there. They have acrylic, wool, angora, silk, cashmere, cotton, bamboo, and even corn materials. And they come in different blends too, so you can have different percentages of blends to get a different feel that you like. Acrylics tend to be the cheapest and great for starters like you guys. And rare wools and cashmeres are pricey, but good for experienced knitters like me. Yeah. So another part of choosing your yarn is the weight, which is the thickness of the yarn, which is labeled on the bands that come around purchased yarn at your store. And this one happens to be a 4, so they range in 0 to 6 sizes, being lace or super bulky. Like this one is pretty much super bulky, really thick. Now that we know a little bit more about the materials that we're working with, we can start on learning how to knit, actually. Okay. So now we can start with the basic knitting that will help us. Now we can start with the basic tools that we need for knitting, and this information is once again provided by Knit Snob, Craft Snob, Lion Brand, and Martha Stewart Living. We'll start off with the slip knot, which is making a knot with your yarn. You grab your loose strand of yarn between your fingers, hold it in your left hand, making a loop. You cross the loop over and pull that loose thread through, kind of like tying a shoelace almost. Okay, and that's the basic part of making a slip knot. Next, you'll thread that onto your left-hand needle. You pull onto the loose strand and it just tightens like that. And then now we can learn how to cast on. When you cast on, you need your 2 needles, of course, holding your left needle in your left hand, holding on to the tail so that you don't knit with the wrong strand. Take your right needle and then pull it through the base of your loop. Hold your loose strand, wrap it around. Oh, you're crossing your needles like an X and pulling the string around, pulling it through your X. You take your right needle and pull that down and straight through on your right needle. Then you slip that onto your left needle, and that's your first cast on. And you just continue doing that until you've done as many cast ons as your pattern requires. So once you've done several cast on stitches, and you have your whole row of cast on stitches like this, you're ready to knit your first row. And this is really similar to the style of cast on that I just showed you. There's just a little differentiation there, and I'll show you that here. So you continue as before, holding your loose strand, putting your right needle through the base of your left hand needle's first loop there, creating an X. Hold your thread in your right hand and pull that around your right needle through the X, pulling that downward and on your right needle. The difference here is when you're casting on, you put that loop onto your left needle, but this time that loop that you just had went through, you push that off your left needle and that'll make it into a stitch. And you just continue that until you've completed your first row. And that's pretty much what knitting is there, just a continuation of that. So now you have the basic concepts for a slip knot, cast on, and knit stitch. You have the essentials to carry out your very first knitting project, and well on your way on becoming expert knitters. You have the tools to overcome the hardest part of knitting, choosing your needles and choosing a yarn. You have the upper hand at beginning to knit. We are now able to identify knitting needles and yarns and successfully create your very first slip knot, cast on, and knit row. Now we can claim our birthright, as Tracy Ullman once said, and start knitting. Yay!